The Galactic Federation had spent centuries perfecting the ultimate test, a brutal, adaptive simulation designed to push any species to its breaking point. It wasn't just about strength or intelligence. It was about survival in its purest, most unforgiving form. The greatest civilizations had taken it. The mighty Zenther, with their impenetrable exoskeletons, lasted 6 cycles before their nerves shattered. The Veln, masters of bioengineering, suffocated when their lungs failed to adapt. Even the Tarkin, who thrived in vacuum, collapsed when the simulation introduced something as simple as rain. The observers watched, recording every failure with clinical detachment. To them, it was a matter of inevitability. No species could endure the full spectrum of horrors the universe had to offer. Not without technology. Not without centuries of preparation. Then the humans arrived. They were an afterthought. Deathworlders, barely spacefaring, their planet a graveyard of extinct megafauna and natural disasters. The Federation expected nothing. A quick, messy death. A confirmation that their test was indeed unbeatable. The humans stepped into the simulation chamber, joking among themselves. One of them, a scarred woman with a grin too sharp for comfort, cracked her knuckles and said, "Asterisk, all right, let's see what this thing's got." Asterisk. The first cycle began. A volcanic eruption. Molten rock surged, the air choked with toxic fumes. The Zenther had tried to outrun it. The Veln had sealed themselves in protective pods. The humans? They moved. Not away, asterisk through star. They wrapped cloth around their faces, used the terrain to shield themselves, and when the heat became unbearable, they dug. One of them laughed, coughing through the ash. Asterisk reminds me of Iceland. Asterisk, the observers stiffened. That wasn't supposed to happen. The simulation shifted. A blizzard now. Temperatures plummeting to levels that froze solid metal. The Tarkin had locked up like statues. The humans huddled, yes, but not in fear. They broke apart the chamber's decorative structures, fashioned crude tools, and built a windbreak, a fire pit. One of them, a man with frost in his beard, grinned at the sky. Asterisk, you call this cold? Asterisk, the test wasn't just failing to break them. It was entertaining them. Then came the Predator, a nightmare of fangs and armored plating, designed to trigger primal fear responses. Every other species had either fled or frozen. The humans? They went quiet, not with terror, with calculation. The woman with a sharp grin picked up a broken piece of simulation debris. Asterisk, all right, kids, who's up for a hunt? Asterisk, the observers finally exchanged glances. Something was very, very wrong. The temperature dropped fast enough to crack bone. The simulation had shifted again. Glacial winds, ice-slick terrain, visibility reduced to a howling white void. Previous species had panicked, their bodies locking up as frostbite set in. The humans just exhaled slow, deliberate clouds of vapor and got to work. One of them, a wiry engineer with burned scars along his arms, started breaking apart the chamber's false rock formations. "Thermal mass," he muttered, passing chunks to the others. "Hold these against your core. Slow the heat loss." Another, a medic with a perpetual squint, began ripping strips from her own jacket. "Tie these around extremities. Keep circulation up." No orders were given. No debate. Just motion. The observers adjusted their feeds, zooming in. This wasn't protocol. The test was designed to overwhelm, to force reliance on pre-programmed survival instincts. Freeze, flee, or fight. But the humans weren't reacting on instinct. They were thinking. Worse, they were cooperating. Then the Predator emerged. It was a nightmare of chitin and reflex-tuned muscle, a creature engineered by the Federation's best xenobiologists to exploit fear. Its hide deflected energy weapons. Its claws could shred alloy. It moved silently, a shadow in the storm, and when it struck, it went for the medic first. She saw it coming. Instead of screaming, she threw herself backward, rolling as the beast's talons gouged the ice where she'd stood. The engineer didn't hesitate. He lunged, jamming his chunk of thermal rock into the creature's gaping secondary mouth. It shrieked, recoiling, and that was all the opening the others needed. They didn't have weapons, so they made them. The sharp-grinned woman wrenched a support strut from the simulation's false terrain, twisting it into a crude spear. The medic scrambled up, pulling a length of frayed wiring from her pocket. Emergency suture thread, repurposed as a garrote. They didn't surround the beast. They herded it toward the engineer, who was now crouched beside the exposed simulation node, fingers jammed into its circuitry. "Hey, ugly!" the woman barked, slashing her makeshift spear across the predator's eyes. It whirled on her, just as the engineer yanked a handful of wires. The chamber flickered. Gravity skewed sideways for a heartbeat. The predator stumbled, its neural interface scrambled by the sudden surge. That was all it took. The medic's wire found its throat. The woman's spear found its heart. Silence. The observers stared. The simulation wasn't hackable. It wasn't supposed to be, but the humans hadn't hacked it. They just improvised. The engineer wiped Icor off his hands, eyeing the dead predator. That was easier than the bears back home. The simulation, as if in response, shuddered. The air thinned abruptly. Oxygen deprivation protocol. Triggered early. The humans swayed, but none fell. The medic pressed her hands to her knees, breathing deliberately. Slow, deep, like altitude training. The woman grinned, even as her lips tinged blue. Hell, this is just like Denver. The observers finally realized their mistake. They built a test to break civilized species. But humans had never been civilized. The oxygen starvation should have dropped them. Every previous species had collapsed within minutes, brains shutting down as their bodies screamed for air. The humans just slowed, adjusted. Their heart rates dipped. Their movements turned deliberate, like deep-sea divers conserving every molecule. The medic exhaled sharply through pursed lips, nodding to the others. Breathe from the belly. Don't waste it. One of them, the youngest, a pilot with nervous hands, started humming, a marching tune, off-key and ragged. The sharp-faced woman joined in, clapping twice between verses. The sound was wrong, defiant. The observers checked their feeds again, certain the audio pickups were malfunctioning. No species sang during suffocation protocols. Then the hallucination started. The simulation pumped and tailored neurotoxins, designed to trigger primal terror. The Zenther had clawed their own eyes out. The Veln curled into fetal balls, whispering to long-dead progenitors. The humans? The pilot blinked at the swirling shadows. That kind of looks like my ex. The medic snorted, swatting at a phantom insect. Mine's uglier. They kept moving, not fleeing the visions, walking through them, as though the horrors were just bad weather. The woman with a grin suddenly stopped, tilting her head. "You hear that?" The others paused. There was nothing, just the simulated wind. Then she laughed. "Exactly. They're trying to scare us with silence." She cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted into the void. "Nice try." My dad was scarier. The simulation escalated. Gravity spiked. 3 standard GS, then 5. The pilot went to his knees, retching. The medic dragged him up by his collar. "Walk or puke. Don't stop." The engineer crawled ahead, fingers digging into the shifting ground. "Rocks are vibrating," pattern means. He spat blood. Earthquake incoming. The tremors hit. The chamber fractured. Molten fissures split the terrain. The humans didn't scramble for cover. They ran toward the cracks. "Heat source," the woman yelled. The pilot wheezed. "Also lava," but followed anyway. They skidded to the edge, holding their hands over the glow. "Hypothermia is worse than burns," the medic muttered, already rotating who stood closest to the heat. The observers were frantically recalibrating. This wasn't resilience. This was insanity. The test was designed to break minds, but the humans' minds bent, warping logic itself to survive. When the radiation alarms blared, the engineer just shrugged. "We'll puke later." When the acid rain began melting their boots, the woman grinned wider. Free pedicure. Then came the final twist. The simulation froze. All threats paused. A resonant voice boomed. Asterisk, yield now. Your suffering ends. Asterisk, every other species had broken at this offer. The humans looked at each other. The pilot wiped vomit from his chin. Is this a timeout? The woman cracked her neck. Nah, it's them begging us to quit. She turned toward the unseen observers, middle finger raised. Fat chance. The simulation roared back to life. Tsunamis, meteor strikes, every catastrophe stacked, and the humans laughed as it tried to kill them. The alarms blared, not in the simulation, but in the observation deck. Technicians scrambled as system after system overloaded. The chamber wasn't just being tested anymore. It was being pushed, strained to its limits by the sheer refusal of its occupants to die. The lead scientist, a Velen with iridescent scales now dulled by stress, watched the feeds with something between awe and horror. They're winning. Inside, the humans had stopped reacting to the disasters like threats and started treating them like obstacles. The tsunami? They broke apart simulation panels to use as rafts. The meteor strikes? They memorized the impact intervals and dodged. The woman with the grin even timed a leap between falling debris, whooping as she landed. Hell yeah, extreme parkour. The medic, bleeding from a gash on her temple, squinted at the shifting terrain. This is getting ridiculous. The engineer, half his jacket melted off from acid rain, grinned. Nah, ridiculous with Siberia. This is just Tuesday. Then, without warning, the simulation cut out. The chamber lights flickered to neutral white. The humans staggered, blinking in the sudden stillness. The pilot coughed, spitting out what might have been a tooth. Wait, did we? The doors hissed open. Federation officials stood frozen in the threshold, their carapaces and robes pristine, their faces unreadable. The humans straightened up, wiping blood and grime from their faces like they just finished a workout, not a galactic trial by fire. The woman with the grin crossed her arms. So, do we get a score? The lead scientist stepped forward, voice modulator glitching with static. You were never meant to survive. The medic rolled her eyes. Yeah, we got that. A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. The test had existed for centuries. No species had ever finished it, let alone broken it. The Velen scientist's claws twitched, inputting frantic commands into a data pad. Your physiological adaptations are unprecedented, but more than that, your psychology. The engineer snorted. Oh, we're all batshit crazy. That's not new. The scientist ignored him, turning to the others. You didn't just endure. You redefined endurance. The simulation had no parameters for this. A hologram flickered to life, replaying moments, the humans laughing in vacuum, weaponizing debris, singing through nerve gas. The pilot scratched his head. So, pass or fail? Silence. Then, from the back of the crowd, a single Tarkin observer, a species that had never spoken to Deathworlders before, let out a low, shuddering click. Translated. It came through as, asterisk, you rewrote the test. Asterisk, the humans exchanged glances. The woman with the grin shrugged. Cool. Can we eat now? The Federation erupted into chaos. Scientists arguing, diplomats transmitting emergency bulletins, security teams eyeing the humans like they might suddenly combust. But the truth was already spreading to the galactic networks, faster than light, faster than reason. Deathworlders don't break. Deathworlders don't yield. And if you push them hard enough, they'll laugh in your face while they tear apart your rules. The medic stretched, popping her spine. So, seriously, is there food, or do we have to improvise that too? The lead scientist closed its eyes. The universe had just gotten infinitely stranger. And humanity? They were just getting started. The Federation's high council chambers had never seen such disorder. Debates raged across species lines, translation systems struggling to keep up with the sheer volume of outrage, disbelief, and, though none would admit it openly, asterisk fear star. Footage of the human test subjects played on loop across every screen, their impossible endurance dissected frame by frame. The lead scientist's report glowed in the air before the assembled dignitaries. They bypassed every failsafe, not through brute force, but by reinterpreting the challenges. A clip showed the engineer rerouting simulation circuits with his bare hands. They treated lethal scenarios as puzzles, A Zenther admiral slammed its armored fist on the table. They cheated. The Veln scientist hissed in frustration. There were no rules to cheat. The test was designed to be unbeatable. Silence fell as the Tarkin delegate rose, its elongated limbs unfolding with deliberate slowness. Irrelevant. The humans did not simply pass. They transcended. It tapped a claw against the playback, freezing on the woman's bloody grin mid-laugh. This is not a species to be tested. It is one to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, in the holding wing, the humans were making the best of Federation hospitality. The medic was dissecting a nutrient pack with clinical disgust. This tastes like recycled coolant. The pilot prodded a gelatinous cube. Pretty sure it's coolant. The door shimmered open. The lead scientist entered, flanked by guards. Not that they'd stop the humans if things went sideways. Your species' performance has raised complications. The woman with the grin leaned back, boots on the table. Let me guess. You don't know whether to give us a medal or dissect us. The scientist's scales flush violet. The council demands clarification. How? The engineer shrugged. You built a box of worst-case scenarios. We live in one. He tossed the nutrient pack aside. Earth's gravity wells a bitch. Our atmosphere is corrosive enough to rust your ships given time. And half our food's poisonous unless cooked right. The medic grinned. Oh, and our moon? It's actively trying to escape orbit. We had to math hard to hit it with rockets. The scientist's data pad clattered to the floor. Outside, the debates reached a fever pitch. Proposals flew. Quarantine humanity. Recruit them, worship them, ban them. The Tarkin delegate watched the chaos, then did something unprecedented. It laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Fools, you seek to categorize them. They will never fit. Back in the chamber, the woman stretched. So what now? You're going to keep staring or ask the real question. The scientist hesitated, which is... She bared her teeth. Not a smile. A challenge. Asterisk, what's next? Asterisk. Across the galaxy, 1,000 alarms blared as human ships. Unauthorized, uninvited, unstoppable. Punched through the quarantine zone. The test, it seemed, was over. The lesson was just beginning. The quarantine breach alarms weren't just sounding, they were screaming. Across 12 sectors, Federation outposts reported the same impossible sight. Human vessels tearing through defensive perimeters like they were made of wet paper. Not with brute force, not with superior tech, but by doing what humans always did, asterisk finding the cracked star. A Tarkin border commander watched in disbelief as a human mining frigate, retrofitted with what appeared to be kitchen appliances, bypassed their gravity mines by tumbling, not evading, not shielding, just spinning wildly through the kill zone while someone on the bridge yelled asterisk, WHE, asterisk over comms. Back on the station, the lead scientist's scales had gone completely white. This is impossible. Those ships weren't rated for her. The woman with the grin, still lounging in the detention area, smirked. Oh, sweetie, you think we wait for safety ratings. Meanwhile, the Federation's central AI, a millennial-old quantum system designed to predict all possible threats, was having what could only be called a meltdown. Its holographic avatar flickered between forms, projections showing human ships doing maneuvers that broke physics by sheer stubbornness. One particularly disturbing loop showed a human pilot eyeballing a jump calculation that should have required a supercomputer. The Tarkin delegate observed this chaos with something resembling respect. Your kind improvises laws of motion. The engineer, now tinkering with the detention field generator just to see if he could, didn't look up. Yep, and we're real motivated right now. Panic transmissions flooded the council chambers. Asterisk, they're using microwave arrays as ion disruptors. Asterisk, their lifeboats are just strapped on engines with seats. Asterisk, why do they keep laughing during combat maneuvers? Asterisk, the medic, monitoring the chaos on a commandeer display, nodded approvingly. That'd be the adrenaline junkie corps. Told them to sit this one out. The lead scientist finally snapped. Asterisk, what do you want? Asterisk, the humans paused. The woman with the grin stood slowly, her smile gone. Same thing we've always wanted. Outside, the human ship stopped. Not because they were blocked. Not because they'd been damaged. Because they'd arrived. Hundreds of vessels, jury-rigged and glorious, hovering at the edge of the Federation's sacred core worlds. The comm channels crackled to life with a single, unified message. Asterisk, let's talk. Asterisk, the galaxy held its breath. The humans, they were just getting comfortable.